in some ways, we were lucky having 7 children. So my father was one of 45 children. We had so many people coming up to us and saying, why are you pushing, especially our boys, into an area where they're only going to fail, into an area where they don't belong, and we were accused of setting them up for failure.
How do you go about raising 7 musical prodigies? Well, Dr. Kadiatu and I sat down at the Bloomberg Equality Summit to discuss this, breaking barriers, inclusion, and more.
Let us know about your family in Sierra Leone.
It's probably an understatement. So my father was one of 45 children. His father had 21 wives and his mother had 10 children. So I was brought up with lots and lots of cousins and aunties and uncles. So when we came to the UK, a big family was what I was used to. My husband's mother is one of 12, his father's one of 7, so he grew up with lots of cousins. So big family was what we understood, I suppose.
Yeah. What's 7 children, right?
Nothing. Yes, so it was a 6 a.m. train from Nottingham to London, and a whole day in London, and then back about 8:30 at night. But just the logistics of getting all those children into the car, to the train station, to London. But I think in some ways we were lucky having 7 children, because you have to, as parents, have a sense of routine. Otherwise you cannot survive bringing up that many children in a sane manner. So the practice was part of that routine. They'd come home from school, they would eat, they would do their homework, they would practice. And because they saw all their brothers and sisters doing the same thing, I think that made it easier in a way. The first thing to be mentioned is finance, which is a huge barrier, but it's not just finance. There's a huge cultural barrier as well. I know when the children were growing up and they were starting to play their instruments, we had so many people coming up to us and saying, why are you pushing, especially our boys, into an area where they're only going to fail, into an area where they don't belong, and we were accused of setting them up for failure. And I think that's a very difficult barrier to get through. And really, if there's a matter of self-confidence as well. Because I think every time we went into a concert, we were the only black people in the audience. There were no black musicians on stage. And so it seemed to be true that, in fact, this wasn't a space we belonged to. Yeah. And I was born in Sierra Leone to an African father, Sierra Leonean father, and a Welsh mother. So already there was a huge barrier that had been overcome with my parents. And I think that probably gave me the strength to think, do you know what, you don't listen to what other people say, you can go anywhere you want, you can, I suppose, go against people's expectations. Yeah. And my husband was the son of immigrant Antiguan parents who had to overcome going to try and buy a house, and at the doorstep the owners wouldn't let them over the doorstep and pretended the house was sold, and all those issues that they had to go through in the 50s and 60s. So I think both of us were brought up with that sense of defiance, which was very helpful, I think. It was blind auditions. So everybody went behind a screen and auditioned, and immediately the numbers of black and diverse people shot up. And so I think what it shows is that there is a kind of unconscious bias, obviously, that goes on. So they would see a black person playing an instrument and immediately think, well, that person can't be as good as a white person playing an instrument. So that's one approach. Another approach I think that happens in companies is blind applications, where you don't see the name, because the name, of course, is immediately a marker. And I think it's the culture of institutions. Because there is a way in which, if you enter, for example, a lot of classical music institutions, there's a very particular culture that goes with that. Yeah. You have to talk in a certain way, behave in a certain way, and that needs to be worked on as well. So it's a constant dialogue, I think. And having people in high places in companies is extremely important, because that immediately changes what you do as a company.
Yeah, having people bought into those suggestions that you mentioned.